Trump defending his harsh jabs at opponents as mainly defensive and necessary given the crowded field, going on to say that if the other candidates are smart, they will start dropping out soon. Joining us right now is one of Donald Trump's opponents, GOP presidential candidate and former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. Governor, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Delighted to be here, Maria. Thank you.
Well, isn't that what Scott Walker said as well? Look, the people who do not have the kind of support that the frontrunners have should start dropping out. Now, where are you, Governor? 1%?
I'm still in the race. You know, look, every race I've ever been in, and I've won lots of elections. I won against the Clinton political machine in Arkansas, which, if you want to talk about a political fight, if you want to discuss going uphill, be the first Republican in 25 years and only the fourth in 150 years to win a race against the Democratic political machine of Arkansas. And you don't win by dropping out. You win by letting other people in front of you burn out. And a lot of times we look at these races here in the middle of October and we act like, oh, my gosh, we know who's going to be the nominee. No, we don't. If we did, we'd be talking about President Giuliani or President Herman Cain, both of whom were leading at this point in the respective elections 8 and 4 years ago.
Now, I think you make a really good point, particularly about your success in Arkansas. Let me ask you this. First off, the issues. What do you think is the most important issue to voters right now, and are we going to get any substance on that soon?
Well, I think we may get more substance in the next debate. In fact, the next two debates. Let me say that CNBC and Fox Business both will be focusing on the economy. When it gets down to it, people want to know there's a job. You know, there's going to be a real focus on whether or not there's going to be jobs for working class people. We've got over 90 million Americans who could be working who aren't working. You know, we've got the lowest job participation rate that we've had since the mid-'70s. And I think that it's time to stop talking about who said what about whom.
Exactly.
And let's get down to the business of getting people to work, because that really does come down to it. Wages have been depressed for the bottom 90% of the population for 40 years.
So what's your
People
answer,
just want
Governor?
to know that they've got a future.
What's your answer then? How do you create jobs?
Well, first of all, we've got to change the tax and regulatory environment, because capital is being chased out of this country because it'll always flow downhill. And right now it's uphill if you have capital to invest in the United States, unless it's capital in financial services. But financial services doesn't create the kind of manufacturing jobs, the likes of which we've lost 5 million of since just the year 2000. 60,000 manufacturing plants have closed. I say let's go to the consumer tax, the fair tax. Get rid of the IRS. Get rid of this punishment on capital and labor, because that's what the current tax system does. It punishes not only the capital that builds the company, but it punishes the labor that makes things. And if we don't start fundamentally changing that.
But, Governor, it's Dagen McDowell. That's regressive. It crushes lower-income Americans, and it
does not.
Probably wouldn't raise enough revenue without crumbling the economy.
All of the above is untrue. It does not crush the bottom. In fact, the people at the bottom third of the economy, under the fair tax, Dagen, they are the ones who benefit the most, 14 to 15%. And this notion, that's one of the false narratives about the fair tax. It actually empowers people. Let me give you an example. If you work 8 hours a day in a factory and you lift heavy things and you sweat through your clothes, you need a better job, so you decide you'll work 16 hours a day. If you doubled your work, you don't get double the pay, because the tax system will put you in a new tax bracket, and the government will get more of your second 8 hours than you did.
Under Donald Trump's plan, if I'm in a household that makes $50,000 a year, I don't pay any income tax at all. So
and that's costing $12 trillion.
Right. And go ahead, Governor.
Well, the fair tax doesn't have a revenue loss. It's a revenue replacement. It's neither a tax increase or a tax decrease, but it's an expansion of the tax base, because right now there are a lot of people in the economy working underground who don't pay. The reason that we can't solve illegal immigration, for example, is not just because it's economically advantageous to the immigrant. It's economically advantageous to the employer, who isn't paying payroll tax and is able to undercut the wages. So one of the ways the fair tax really addresses this is bring those wages up so that people are getting their full paycheck. They go to the marketplace to buy. The prebate of the fair tax untaxes their basic necessities And that's why people in the bottom third of the economy are the ones who benefit the most.
Here's John Helserman.
Don't most states already tax sales, and if you're going to impose a federal tax on consumer spending, aren't you just piling on to what states are already doing?
Well, it may sound like that, John, but keep in mind that right now, if you build something in America, 22% of the cost of the item made in America is hidden taxes. And that's because we tax the labor and the capital that go into it. What if you remove that, and so that the chair that's produced in China that isn't taxed in production, isn't taxed at export or at import, now doesn't have the financial advantage? Now you can put American workers back to work making things. It's not enough that Americans simply create and design and innovate. They need to make things. And while we're speaking about economic boost, one of the things, I'm listening to these numbers, the energy prices are down. One way to get that energy production up, as well as the prices where they stabilize, is let's become the #1 energy producer in the world and also the exporter. Let's challenge the marketplaces in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Let's put the Russians, the Iranians, and the Saudis out of the energy business, put millions of Americans to work, and start exporting our energy, because we have the world's largest surplus in supply of energy, and we ought to be utilizing it and getting rich out of it, quite frankly.
Governor, we'll be watching. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Governor Mike Huckabee there. Breaking